Welcome to the April 2022 edition of the NASA Citizen Science Leaders Series. This month, we're going to be celebrating the fantastic things that happen when projects succeed in creating welcoming spaces for people to do science together. So before we begin, or as we begin today's topic, I want to share a really simple model that I learned in a facilitative leadership training course some years ago. You might have already seen this. As it was presented to me, the point was that these three things, results, process, and relationship, are inextricably linked. You can't have good results if you're not paying attention to your relationships with people and if you don't have a clear process that everyone's using to get to the results. If you just focus on relationships, you won't have the results and you'll actually not have great relationships because people come together to work on things in order to be productive and accomplish something together. These things really are inextricably linked. When I saw this model, it totally lit up my brain. I was one of those people, and I suspect others on this call are as well. I was focused on results. And why not? That's what we measure, right? But for the first time, when I saw this model, I realized it gave me an excuse to focus on relationships and process. And I could quickly think of examples in my own life and my own experience where my inattention to relationships and process had absolutely gotten in the way of results. So this model also came to my mind when I was writing a guide for the Gulf of Maine Research Institute on how to develop citizen science projects. It has enormous relevance for citizen science. If you're not attending, I have to figure out where to click. If you're not attending to the scientific results and focused on getting there, you'll lose your relationships with people. People won't want to contribute because they'll feel like their time is wasted. Likewise, you need to have really clear protocols or tasks and clear support and training for the people you hope to engage. And you have to create a community where people feel welcome. They're with people who are friendly and encouraging, a place where they want to spend time. You really need all three of those things, or it's incredibly difficult to create a sustainable, productive citizen science project. So one final thought as we move ahead. A few of the extraordinary citizen scientists that I invited to speak on today's topic turned me down, and one primarily because he speaks English as a second language. So as if it wasn't enough that he was already participating in a project and had contributed to multiple publications, he was doing it all in another language. But in our email correspondence, it was quite clear that he had a lot to say on the subject. So I invited him to share some thoughts in writing that I could share with you. And one of his sentences beautifully illustrates this idea of the three dimensions of success. So Jorg wrote to me, "From my own experience, I can say that if no one had answered my questions at the beginning or given me hints where I could read up on things to understand, I would probably have left the project after a short time." Pretty good encapsulation of those ideas. And it's no wonder that he was asked to serve as a moderator for the talk forum on the Zooniverse project which he contributes to. It's also a stellar example of how generous and great citizen scientists can be. He went on and gave us a few comments, and remembering that our topic today is thinking about the supports and structures and practices of projects to help people make better contributions. I want to share his ideas with you. So he had a couple ideas about supporting people speaking in or operating in a different language. And for many of us, even for people who are native English speakers, the language of the discipline where a project sits might be completely foreign. So this is good advice for anyone. Speak clearly. If you're going to use jargon and concepts or terminology from your field or acronyms, that's fine, but expand them and explain them regularly. Share materials ahead of time, share recordings after the fact, share notes. All of those things can be used by people to look words up, put them in translation tools, slow down and make sure everybody's following the language that you're using. He's also a big fan of projects that have a leveling up of users. So you have a group of people who've contributed or already invested a lot of time in a project, bring them inside, they know more, you can teach them more, they can be more productive and contribute more to the science, but they also will be particularly good from their insights as new participants themselves on helping to train other new participants to your project. So use those skilled people who have joined and learned how to be successful in your project to help other people be successful. We're going to hear more about that today. And also he encouraged projects to share results, share the status of the research with the citizen scientists who are curious to know what's happening, how their efforts are being used, what the questions of the day are, and share your discoveries, not just in the scientific literature, but also more broadly, because that's a really effective way to bringing new people into your project, new volunteers and new scientists. So we have a big group of speakers today. We're going to hear from a citizen scientist and a scientist from 4 projects, each sharing a different example of how citizen scientists have contributed above and beyond the task that a project invites them to do. So we've asked them in 10 minutes to share just a quick overview of the project that they're talking about, characterize the unusual contribution made by the citizen scientists and what difference it made to the project, to the people, and the project's productivity, and then reflect on the practices or structures that helped to create the context and the opportunity for that beyond the usual off-piste, above and beyond contribution by the citizen scientist. So we're going to begin today with Els and Nora from Planet Hunters TESS. You may recognize Nora as the PI of Planet Hunters TESS, the co-host of the Planet Hunters Coffee Chats, or from her previous appearances on our series. Welcome back, Nora. And today she's joined by Els Baeten, who has been described to me by another PI of a citizen science project, Colin Chandler of Active Asteroids, as a godsend. Els, we're really honored to have you with us. Nora and Els, over to you.
Oh, great, thank you. And I can only agree about the comment about Els being a godsend, but we'll get to that. Thank you for having us here today. So yeah, we'll be talking about Planet Hunters TESS, which is a Zooniverse project. So I'll give a very brief overview of the project. Our kind of overall goal is to find planets outside of our own solar system, or exoplanets, and we find these with what is known as the transit method. So very, very briefly, if we have a planet orbiting around a star, if that planet passes directly between us as the observer and that star, then it will block out a small amount of light which is emitted by the star. So if we measure the brightness of the star, we see a small dip or a transit event, and that can tell us about there being a planet in this system. So the data that we use is data from the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, or TESS, which is a NASA mission. And this mission monitors the brightness of thousands and thousands of stars. And then we can look through that data to look for those small dips that tell us about a planet. So the task that we have on Planet Hunters TESS, the Zooniverse platform, is very simple. We show them this data from one star at a time, which you can see here. And if there are these dips in the data, like we can see in this example here, then we simply ask the citizen scientists to mark those on by drawing a box over those dips. So we need to know where to click. So we have a very, very active community of over 30,000 volunteers who help out with the project. And since the launch of the project, in 2018, end of 2018, we have had over 20 million classifications completed by these 30,000 volunteers. And I'm sure, as you can imagine, with this very, very large community, we have a lot of activity on the site and on the talk discussion forums. And there are a lot of questions that arise all the time, just like Jörg said in his comments as well. So to kind of help manage these questions, to help answer these questions, which can be quite challenging and time-consuming task, we have moderators. And this is why it's so exciting to have Els here today, who is a Planet Hunters TESS moderator and has been since the beginning of Planet Hunters TESS. I also want to say she's been a moderator, or she was a moderator on the initial Planet Hunters. So she's actually been with the Planet Hunters team for longer than I have. But yeah, so very briefly, the role of moderators is to help keep the project going and to help answer people's questions, both about the science and the in-depth kind of science questions, but also about the project itself and about Zooniverse. And kind of there are different parts to this to make people feel welcome with projects and to kind of keep them going and encourage them to try out different projects, but also the other side to kind of maybe the people who've been with the project for longer and to answer their more in-depth science questions. So it's really important to have this range of moderators who kind of take on different roles and have different questions that they like to answer. And I will let Els tell you more about how she contributes to the project.
Well, I've been with Zooniverse right from the start, so I know how it works and how the projects work. And whenever there's a new project, I try it out. I try out every project. Some of them I like, some of them I don't like so much, but anyway. And then I also can't help myself but go on the talk forum, and then you see the same questions coming again and again. Oh, I made a mistake. Can I go back? Well, no, sorry, that's not how it works. But don't worry, lots of people will see the same image. So, and well, yes, that is what I do. I think people will say, oh no, there she is again. But I pop up in another project. But that's really what I like to do as well, because I know when I started out, it can be very scary to well, work, you know, you're doing science, but oh no, and that's, what if I do something wrong? And so I really like to make people feel welcome and safe and comfortable in what they're doing. On Planet Hunters TESS, I'm not so much on the technical side of things, so I can spot the transit if it's not too difficult. I'm more the, well, how to say it, the basic questions for people and to make them feel comfortable and welcome. I know not just for people who are new at posting, but also because I move around a lot in Zooniverse projects. You can feel that people from other projects who say, oh, there she is. Most of the time, it's they feel welcome, more welcome in the project because they know that I'm there as well. So yeah, that's what I do and what I like to do as well.
Yeah, and I would like to add that that's completely underselling yourself. You do not just the moderating, but also you've classified on all of these projects. And I think you've completed one of the highest numbers of classifications on the Zooniverse platform overall. So it's your contributions are just incredible on all fronts. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of add to that and just re-emphasize that Els really helps to make people feel comfortable in these projects. And because she is such an expert across all of these Zooniverse projects, it does just people like seeing your name and like asking you questions, and it really does help people keep people engaged both in the short term but also in the long term, which is very important to have a quote unquote healthy citizen science project. I do want to mention that just I mean the moderators in general are just really important on all of the projects. So at the bottom of the slide, I've also listed just some of the other moderators that we have on Planet Hunters TESS. And everyone has, as I said before, everyone has kind of their own expertise and their different types of questions that they like to answer. So some of the names that you see on there, they like to answer the really in-depth kind of science questions, which again is equally important to answering the questions about the project as a whole and about how Zooniverse works. And I do think they work really well together and are both really, really important. So I'll just go to I'll have one final comment, kind of to say that we've recently had quite a big increase in the amount of activity we've had on our discussion forums. So this is partly because of the coffee chat video series. So in these video series, we take different topics and we discuss them, and we provide specific tools and resources that help citizen scientists kind of carry out their own research and go beyond the kind of citizen science work that is done on classifications that is done on Planet Hunters TESS itself. And because of these videos and the resources, we have seen this increase in activity. And I think that this has made the role of moderators even more important. So we've had more questions because of this, just the increased activity, more people have joined and more people have stayed slightly longer on the project. So this role of moderators is just really important, and we see that all the time. So it's, yeah, it's a very important contribution.
Thank you, Els and Nora. I would love to see, we need a network analyst to go in and look at the impact of the moderators. And I imagine if we kind of could quantify the contributions that all of the people that you've helped to feel welcome and feel like they belong in the projects where you've been supporting the talk, it would astonish us, the reach of the impact that you have had and the others who've been talk moderators, and a nod to Jörg, who's in our audience as well, and all of you who've contributed or encouraged anyone, anytime with a comment. What you do is so very important. Thank you. Okay, next up, we have two people from the other end of our time zone range. Chris Arp and Karin Bodony are joining us from Alaska, where Chris is part of the science team behind Fresh Eyes on Ice, and Karin, who works for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, has emerged as an essential community partner. Chris and Karin, over to you.
Thanks for the introduction and asking us to join you today. So I'm a hydrologist by training at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, but I do a lot of work I started off in biology, and I do a lot of work with a lot of different kinds of scientists, but this is my first project working with community-based monitoring and citizen science. And Karin is a biologist, but she does a lot of work in hydrology and permafrost, and she works with a really broad range of different scientists as a biologist with a national wildlife refuge in Galena. And so our project is called Fresh Eyes on Ice. These are a list of our collaborators and researchers, and this is a National Science Foundation funded project, but we also have a NASA funded project that relates to this called Community Eyes on River Ice. And Katie Spellman, who's right here, I think was originally asked to present this presentation, but she is actually going to be given an award tomorrow at the National Academy of Science for her work in the citizen science field in part, so she can't be joining us, but I just wanted to give a shout out to all her hard work in both of these projects. So this is a picture of Karin in her native habitat, and I'm visiting her with a colleague of mine, and this is one of our first visits for the Fresh Eyes on Ice project, which started 2 years ago. And so our kind of overarching question is, can we expand river and lake ice observations and at the same time provide opportunities for K through 12 science education? And so our model to do this is working with what we call community-based monitoring teams, which is where we team a local scientist with a K through 12 teacher, and then work with their students to collect snow and ice data that then we share with a broader public to inform climate change and also subsistence activities and travel and public safety. And the unusual contribution we've made, I had to, since citizen science is kind of a new thing to me, I actually had to kind of ask our team, I'm like, so, okay, what's so unusual about this? And Katie Spellman said that it was really the long-term personal partnerships that we're making with these community-based monitoring teams and citizen scientists that make our project stand out. And another aspect of this that we didn't plan on is just using something as simple as making photo observations of freeze up and break up on rivers. And that really came out of social media, people sharing those observations on social media. And so that's also kind of an unusual contribution that's come out of this project so far. And so here's kind of the components of the project. So this project is only focused in Alaska right now, but it's a pretty big state and it's got a lot of lakes and rivers, and they are frozen for a good portion of the year. So we use a combination of field studies. We use real-time cameras and buoys. We do remote sensing with satellites and drones. We do archiving and analysis of historic data sets. But I think one of the funnest parts and most rewarding parts of this project is working with teachers and their students in community-based monitoring. And so just to give a little background of how at least I got into this, as I said, I'm a hydrologist, and I started off my work in Alaska by studying lake ice on the North Slope. And so this is one of the first holes I drilled in the ice, which at the time was somewhat challenging because it was about 2 meters thick. But over time, we started doing more and more of these observations in more and more places over time. And eventually we contributed to this data set shown here, which is maximum ice thickness from over a century, and where we've seen a real thinning trend, which we attribute to warming winters and changes in sea ice, which is great, but that's just in one place in Alaska. And we really came to recognize that we really needed to get more help in taking these kinds of measurements in more places to really understand how these changes are happening more widespread, which I think is best done by a community. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Karin. And Karin, I think you're going to need to let me know when to advance the slides, but
that's right. Okay. So I work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I think it was mentioned that I live in Galena, which is my connection to this actually started very early when we started this program. Chris and I had worked on kind of a joint project looking at different methods of monitoring ice conditions during spring breakup. And our refuge system does aerial flights to survey, to monitor how breakup is progressing across the refuges, because it's really relevant to waterfowl arrival and staging and migration and ultimately nesting and things. So we really want to get a sense of when breakup is happening. And we'd started to look at ice conditions during breakup and accumulated thawing degree days using our weather data at Galena that goes back to the 1940s. So we were working on that project. And so I was kind of in on the Fresh Eyes on Ice monitoring program right from the get-go. You can go ahead and click on that. So then we started doing more local observations, both for the National Weather Service and then through Fresh Eyes on Ice. And this is the lake that we observe with our elementary school students. Go ahead and click. And here's a picture of our students doing an ice measurement there at Alexander Lake, which is the float pond and used quite a bit in the community. It's right adjacent to Galena. So go ahead. So I've been working for 3 years with the program. This is showing the network of the different community sites, and Galena is there in red. So we're kind of in the center of the state on the Yukon River, but we have, you can see quite a spread of, this is where we have partnerships with schools that are involved in monitoring. Go ahead. So these are the starting communities, and you want to click through these. We started with 6 communities in 2019. We added more in the 2020 season and the 2021 season, and you'll notice that that corresponds exactly with COVID. And so this has been certainly different than we expected, because we've had a ton of hurdles in trying to work with students, actively pairing scientists with students and doing school programs in times when we don't even know if there's going to be school on any given week. But it's actually been tremendously effective, even despite all these challenges. And probably equally as challenging are weather conditions in the winter in interior Alaska or across Alaska. You can imagine there's times when we want to go out, but it's 30, 40 below, blowing snow sideways, and just, you know, we've had a lot of challenges with that as well. Go ahead, next slide. We also include elders, and one thing that's really neat about this program is because it's about health and safety and culture for all the people living in these communities, because these rivers and lakes that we use are our transportation corridors all winter long. And you know, our lifestyle is really based around the seasons and around how we can get out onto the land. People are very, very land tied. They have been for thousands of years. There's deep cultural connections to ice and travel and wildlife. So all these pieces carry an important cultural component. This is Sam Dementev, who grew up in Holy Cross. He worked on the barge system for many years, so he traveled up and down the rivers. He has a ton of just experiential knowledge. He's a wonderful storyteller, and he's really devoted to turning kids into scientists, because he knows that that scientific way of observing is what really keeps individuals and keeps communities alive in situations that otherwise could be very hazardous. Knowing about when the ice is safe, when to travel, where not to go, things like that. So he's one of many elders that we work with in the communities. We try to encourage the students to interact with elders, and also any kind of knowledge bearers, you know, younger folks that are going out but just really experienced in ice conditions. So there's a really neat connection there as well. Next slide. I'm going to kind of go through these quickly because we're running out of time. We also are trying to collect data from historic records. Some of that is quite old. Chris mentioned the Ninana Ice Classic, where we statewide, there are tickets sold for people to guess when the ice is going to go out on the river there, using a tripod connected to a clock. So those records go back quite a ways, and then other more recent things like the work that we do on our refuge. So we're trying to collect that, as well as this up and coming, you know, new scientists doing these observations. So present observations. This is our first team. We bring the teachers in when we can. COVID's kind of thwarted this, to try and have that relationship component that we talked about. And next slide. There's a couple really neat aspects to this. One is just getting kids outside, engaged with their environment. And as I mentioned, there's a really important cultural component to that, as well as the health and safety component. And then the next slide will show just really getting these kids hand-on skills with equipment, learning how to use equipment, how to make scientific measurements, how to care for equipment, how to sample properly. Just really great for them to be able to have hands-on learning that way. So, and the neat thing too about this, I'll say in closing, for my part, is that because we have this core program of what we measure across the whole state, but then because we have individual communities working in their certain environments, working with other community members, there's a lot of opportunity for self-expression and sort of adjusting or adapting the program to what really meets the cultural and scientific needs for that particular community as well. So I think that's it, Chris, from my side. Oh, no, I didn't talk about, oh, this is the other piece. Yeah, so we mentioned that this health and safety aspect, and this information also goes to the National Weather Service, which does predictions and monitoring of spring breakup and on the rivers, because flooding is quite common on these rivers. And this is a picture of the Yukon River during breakup. And the next picture shows actually our community in Galena, and the center two-story building in blue there is my office. Where I work, we flooded quite significantly in 2013. We were one of several villages that flooded in that year. So there's also real-time information that comes from this research that is really relevant in the moment. And Chris mentioned getting the information from our social media, our Facebook page, and other social media is one benefit that we didn't actually expect to get from this, that would be as sort of relevant in the moment. People have really taken this opportunity to share observations from across the state. And in this day of having that social media platform, it's pretty neat to have that connection across the whole state.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I was just going to say that, yeah, when we did plan on having a social media component to this project, but it really has taken off, and it actually directly led to this new NASA citizen science project where we're actually actively soliciting observations of freeze up and break up on rivers, and those go directly to the National Weather Service, and they use those for forecasting ice jam floods and those kinds of things, along with helping people travel safely on rivers. So that's been a really neat aspect of this project that, well, we just didn't know how it was going to go, and it's been fun. And here are some of the ways that people can contribute observations directly. We actually are working with the NASA Globe Observer to make river ice observations. We have our own system. We're working with a Canadian group called the Indigenous Knowledge Social Network, which has their own social media platform, which now is going to be focusing on freshwater ice. Yeah, that's all we had, but we really welcome people to check out our website and join our social media, and maybe make contributions, even if you're in a place, well, obviously in your places other than Alaska, but we'd love for people to join our social media, and yeah, thanks for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you, Chris and Karen. And Karen, I'd love what you were saying about the project creating space for communities to express themselves and see themselves in the project, which I suspect, just like what Els is doing and others are doing in Talk, helping people feel at home, really helps to encourage participation. Thank you. So next, we'll hear from a pair from Backyard Worlds. So if you were to visit NASA's new citizen scientist publications page and search for Caselden, you'll notice that he is a named co-author on all but one paper listed for Backyard Worlds Planet 9. We're not here today to talk about publications. That conversation is going to happen on April 21st. But suffice it to say, Dan has made some extraordinary contributions to Backyard Worlds, including contributions of software that dramatically improve the project's workflow. So here with Dan to tell you about that is Jackie Faherty, one of the leaders of Backyard Worlds Planet 9 science team, and the senior scientist and senior education manager jointly in the Department of Astrophysics and the Department of Education at the American Museum of Natural History. Jackie and Dan, thank you both for being with us.
Hey.
Thanks.
And I'll kick us off with a little introduction about Backyard Worlds before I hand it to Dan, who's basically one of the research team members at this point of Backyard Worlds. I keep telling him he's basically a PhD student, if not already got your PhD already, Dan. So Backyard Worlds is a project that started because I am partially convinced that there's an object closer than the closest star. So Proxima Centauri is the closest star to us. However, in 2014, there was a discovery made by an astronomer named Kevin Lumen. And what he discovered by his eyeball and by spending hours upon hours upon hours staring at images and blinking them was an object that was moving very fast, but it was extremely cold, which meant that it was giving all of its light in the infrared, and specifically in the mid-infrared. And I had been working with the Discovery team, the actual team that built NASA's Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer telescope, launched it into space. It was taking images of the sky at wavelengths that your eye can't see, that draws out cold compact objects. And I was just flabbergasted when Kevin Lumen, in a single author paper, revealed the fourth closest object to our solar system. The fourth closest system. You have the Proxima Centauri, Alpha Centauri system. You have Barnard's star, And then you have another system that Kevin found through the same method called Lumen 16 that we all missed because it was in a crowded region, that it's like embarrassing that scientists hadn't found it, frankly. And then 0855, this cold compact object that you couldn't find before this method was introduced. And it's this blink method that Kevin used, that you take images with a span of time between them that hit a wavelength that you know could potentially discover your object. You blink them, you look at them, and the human eye is very good at detecting patterns. And Mark Kushner kind of came and gave a talk somewhere where I was at. I was a postdoc at Carnegie's DTM at the time. And he was talking about the Disk Detective project that Steven Silverberg is going to talk about next, and kind of mentioned something about some red moving objects and was like, does anybody want them? And I was like, yes, give them to me. And he was like, why do you want them? And I said, because you don't know what that is. That could be amazing. A red object that somebody saw, it's cold. Maybe it's like closer than the close star. I don't know. In that case, doubtful, but in WISE, it could still be there. That was our hook. That was our thread. And then the other part is that Planet 9, the potential ninth planet in our solar system, may very well exist, and you may be able to find it by blinking images and catching an object that jumps around in between them when there's a baseline in between the images. So thus was born Backyard Worlds, where Mark was like, do you think citizens can help? And I was like, yeah, eyeball. I don't want to eyeball all this stuff. And so Backyard Worlds was born. We have this amazing core science team. And then Dan Caselden shows up, who apparently the story of him finding us, I love. Like, we got a lot of press when we first came out because we could find Planet 9. And Dan kind of saw it when he was like on his treadmill or something. And he's like, I think I could probably do a better software package than what they're doing. And we pulled Dan in, and this is part of why Dan has been helping us discover all of these amazing objects that are spitting distance away from the solar system. Have we found one closer than the closest star? No, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It could potentially be out there as extremely cold and just extremely difficult to find. However, we have found a potpourri of amazing objects that were previously missed, like scientists like myself that have been doing this for a decade and looking for objects that might be really close by, that might be intriguing. And Backyard Worlds is such a fun project because it's very exploratory. It's very much stuff that's close to home, very science fiction. Like, these are the kinds of worlds you're going to fly to when Earth goes away. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is showing up on Star Trek, people. These are the objects. This is the close by solar neighborhood. All right, so that's our project, Backyard Worlds. Anybody can be a part of it. Come join us. But now you can hear from one of our premier citizen scientists that has been so helpful in finding the majority of our most amazing discoveries. So Dan, take it away and explain all your amazingness.
Thank you so much. Let's see. So Backyard Worlds, what you're seeing here are 4 images of what it looks like to a user when you jump in. This is shown right at the beginning as examples because it's great examples. They're really easy. 0855, one of the 2 that Jackie mentioned, is up at the top. You see it earlier in time and then later in time. You see that it moved. The reason why you have kind of the snow and then these white little spots with some darkness next to them, these are difference images. So they've taken in a set of images at one point in time, set of images at another point in time, and then subtracted the 2 and shown you the result. The point of that is to get rid of everything that stays the same and just show you the stuff that moves. So if you had a planet in the outskirts of our solar system, it would hop and move like crazy. If you have a close or not too crazy far away brown dwarf or star, it would kind of like plod across the screen a bit. So this method is fantastic for pulling out things that move. The problem for me and other people that I was encouraging to play with this is that it's not good for understanding the data, because all you get are these residuals. You don't really understand what's going on. All of those really bright white and dark spots, they're all stars, but you don't see that. You just see the effects of difference imaging. So as we started going through and started finding things that we thought were potentially really interesting, but we didn't know, and we didn't want to waste the scientist's time and be wrong, we would try to find other ways to interrogate the data and see if we were right before we would hit submit. That's eventually where WiseView came from. Let's see, click. So here are images that would be showed by WiseView, which is a website. This is the same set of images as what are in Backyard Worlds, but without the extra treatment to highlight motion. So you can see the stars that are stationary or possibly galaxies. And you can start to see some very, very faint things, like the image on the right is WISE 0830. The image on the left is 0855. And it looks certainly different, but now you can kind of understand what's going on. And if you see something really interesting in Backyard Worlds difference images, you can now click through from Zooniverse into WiseView and see, was this sort of an artifact, cosmic ray strikes, asteroids that make it through the image processing pipeline, other artifacts from the WISE data set can all cause kind of strange, interesting looking things. So being able to now say, okay, I see something that looks out of place, but I don't know what it is. Now you can click in with WiseView and see, oh, it's this, or oh, that kind of looks like one of the other stars in the frame, but it moves, which would be a good one. So that was the main purpose of it. It was initially created by a coworker of mine, Paul Weston, and myself. He's not associated with this project at all. He just likes solving people's problems, which is fantastic. Some stats. So the site averages about 80 seconds. Every 80 seconds, someone engages with the site in an interactive way. So not crawled or what have you. They're clicking buttons and doing all that stuff. 21 peer-reviewed papers have cited WiseView, and we've launched our own kind of side search of the WISE data using just WiseView. It's easier than if you have a small scale search that you want to conduct. It's easier to just put together a bunch of links to a website and blast it out to other users than it is to set up a full Zooniverse backed site and all that. How are we on time? We have time for these talking points? Good, okay. So the big why was it created in the first place? It came about from both wanting to understand more of the data and also want to be more accurate. That's, I think, really common to the users. They don't want to waste scientists' time. They're there to help, and they want to help. So there were a lot of, WiseView was just one. There were a lot of people making little tools, offering tips to do that. Early on, it was hard to figure out kind of where in the field exactly you wanted to look up more. So let's say you saw something in the top right, you needed to get pretty precise coordinates to start to look around there. You'd have to kind of follow with your finger along the screen to figure out what the coordinates would be. So someone wrote a little crosshair graphical user interface plugin for Windows to tell you what the coordinates would be. Another user, Frank, who we were talking about earlier, made a desktop version of something like WiseView, but with many, many more features that can also look at other data sets. So it's a pretty common thing that when people start getting into it, they're going to want to augment their experience, make themselves better, make themselves faster. One more example, another colleague of mine, Andrew White, he and I were looking at GRASP, and we both ended up creating our own offline versions of the game, which is another citizen science project that's structured as a game. We both created our own offline versions of it to try and figure out how we can send better inputs and winning solutions to the game to the scientists. So I think it's going to be a common trend. People who want to help are going to use whatever tools they're used to using, building software, editing websites, whatever they're accustomed to make it better. As for why superusers stick with a project, I think the devotion to the field of the science team is really what did it for me. I know everyone has different motivations, but coming in and seeing people who actually care and will happily get up at 4 a.m. and start calling around. That's what really makes it. That's what made me stick, and it was different for everyone. That's what did it for me.
Jackie, anything else to add?
I would add
Or
that's
you?
an awesome summary. And what I just put this in the chat that
Yeah.
one awesome thing that just came out from this great tool that Dan has developed that so many of our users ended up loving, and that as scientists we're using. I sent it to a collaborator today to talk about this cool new object that was discovered by somebody else on our team. And he was like, what is this amazing tool that you just sent me? And we just won a NASA astrophysical data analysis processing grant for a project related to finding new objects in the WISE data set, but a nice big chunk was to support that software. And so there's a really nice pipeline here of conversation between, you know, Dan didn't have to work with us. You didn't have to do anything. You're not getting your PhD with us, Dan. This was something you did in your free time, but it turned into a NASA funded side project. So
Great. And one thing that I heard, Dan, was you described in the project that there was a real culture of people going above and beyond. And to have a culture, you have to have people know each other. So there's something in there for our discussion at the end. So last, but certainly not least, we have 2 people from Disk Detective. Steven Silverberg, who's the PI of this project, was actually the first person to respond to my open request for speakers. And he nominated Hugo Durantini Luca, a citizen scientist in Argentina, it's the farthest south in our call probably. And Hugo has not only contributed hours of scientific work to the project, but he also built a relationship between this detective and an Argentinian telescope. And I'm also going to tell my favorite story about Hugo. We talked, it was probably a year ago, and he was describing all the work that he'd done in this project. And I said, why haven't you gone and gotten your own PhD? Clearly you love doing this. And his comment to me, I thought was so insightful. He said, why would I do that? I would have to spend years taking classes in a classroom with citizen science or with the NASA citizen science projects. I get to do the science right now. And that really says a lot about who he is. So Steven and Hugo, tell us more about this relationship with the Argentinian telescope.
Sure. So, hi, I'm Steven. Pleasure to meet you. Jackie actually very briefly introduced the concept of Disk Detective in her talk. So the way I think we'll do this is I'm going to just interview Hugo because Hugo has been on this project longer than I have, as I recall. I joined the project in about month 5 of its existence, and Hugo, I think, was like day 1 or 2. So, Hugo, what are we trying to do at Disk Detective?
Well, we are basically trying to find a place where planets could be forming, looking for a star or a system where we search for 2 types of things, actually. Systems where the planets are still forming, those systems are young, the planets are accreting. The other day, one person that has collaborated with this detective was sharing some discovery about a planet being observed in the stellar forming. Those are young, the planets are forming, there are a lot of dust and infrared excess that is what we are looking for. And we are also looking for other type of digs where the stellar system was already formed. There is no accretion, the planets are already there. Kind of like looking for our own solar system, another solar system. So those are more tricky to find since the signals are different. So we're basically trying to find that digs where the planets are still forming or are already formed in different stages of evolution to understand better the mechanisms behind the stellar system formation, planet formation, solar system, etc. Things?
Indeed. We're using the Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer that Jackie mentioned to look for stars that have extra infrared light around them, which is a signature of the circumstellar disks that Hugo was discussing. And we use citizen scientists to help look through some of this data because, well, just getting computer reads on how bright the object is in each band can tell us this is an object that has more infrared light than you might expect. You can only really tell what kind of an object it is by looking at it. Unless you actually look at the images, you don't know if you're seeing a star with some dust around it, like we're trying to find, or a galaxy that happens to be bright and infrared, which is most galaxies, or multiple stars that are close together and blending in the images. So to help dig these things out of the very, very large haystack that is the WISE data set, we have tens of thousands of citizen scientists combing through images that we've images of objects that we've identified in multiple wavelengths and have them help us sort things into bins of what we found based on, does this look like it's an oval, like it's a galaxy? Does this have multiple objects that could be blending, etc.? The first time I discovered Hugo when I came onto the project was shortly after I joined as an intern at NASA in the summer of 2014. I started getting emails from a Google group because Hugo and a few other people who had become very devoted to the project on our talk page had found that it was easier to start a Google group to ask questions than it was to try and find individual conversations on talk. And that became a great resource for getting myself up to speed on what the project was doing and getting up to speed on the community that was already forming among the citizen scientists, and knowing that the citizen scientists were going to be very eager to do more than just click through images and classify them, because one of the things we did my first week was very quickly select objects to be submitted for follow-up observations in the Northern Hemisphere. And
Baeten.
Yes, our first vetting runs where we needed things quickly. So we asked the superuser, our advanced user team, this Google group of super users, do you guys have anything? And they sent us, yes, here are all of these. And that's become one of our primary methods of following things up more quickly than waiting for classifications. But then Hugo went above and beyond that as well, because while we had access to telescopes in the Northern Hemisphere to learn more about those objects by taking spectra of them, we did not at the time have easy access to anything in the Southern Hemisphere. But Hugo, being more in the Southern Hemisphere than we were, did. So how did you get involved with Caselden, Hugo?
Well, that first started with Mark, that did initial contact with the people over here in my city, in Cordoba, in the Cordoba Observatory. There was, the contact was Mercedes, that is now the new director of the Cordoba Observatory since 2 months ago. I don't remember how the contact was between Mark and Mercedes. Well, since I was in the Cordoba city, Mark asked me, hey, Hugo, you want to go to pay a visit to the observatory to talk with Mercedes and Luciano, that was her PhD student in that moment. So you can present the project to them, explain what we do in the project. So if they like the project, maybe they want to join in, and we can do observation with Caselden. So I went to the observatory. Even if I'm in my city, I have to be honest, I didn't pay a visit to the observatory until that point. Maybe I went once in the primary school, but that was my first visit to the observatory. Well, I speak with them, the presentation, showing the site, the old site, and well, they really liked the project and they jumped in. So I don't remember. I remember the first travel was in 2015. I don't remember if I speak with them that year or in 2014. I bit confused with that. But yes, the first travel to Caselden was after in 2015 with
So when
Luciano.
we say the first travel, how far is it from Cordoba to Caselden?
I don't remember the
terms of
distance in
time?
miles right now, but in time travel, in bus, 8 hours, between 8 and 9 hours. Oh, that is from Cordoba to the city of San Juan. You have to add another, depend of the car you are using, 3 hours, between 3 and 5 hours, depending on the travel speed from San Juan to Caselden. So yeah, I was missing that in the count. So yeah, from Cordoba to the telescope proper, you have 12 hours at least.
So just to make absolutely clear, Hugo took it upon himself to join on actual follow-up observing runs, traveling 12 hours across Argentina there and back again to go up the mountain. And how many times have you gone on observing runs now?
3. I went in 3 separate observing runs.
Yes.
The last one was in 2018. 2018, yeah.
Oh. And so what was that experience like for you, going from not just looking at the images on the site to actually seeing how we collect data and taking part in collecting data yourself?
Yeah, it was quite mind-blowing actually, because that actually was my first time using a telescope. So I kind of started to use a big one. That was my my first telescope. The one in Caselden has 2.15 meters. I can be confused, but it is big. So yeah, it was quite experience because I never used a telescope before. Maybe I visited the telescope in the observatory in Cordoba, but that is a museum. So
If
yeah, I
people are
didn't.
curious, this is a picture Hugo took while he was there.
Yeah, that is the dome for Caselden. So yeah, that was my first visit. By that time, yes, I didn't visit Bosque Alegre yet. So yeah, that was my first visit to a big telescope. So yeah, it was kind of mind blowing to see everything in action, including the spectrograph and all the different things we ended doing with Luciano. That allowed me to actually take the data with the telescope. I have a photo of that in my computer, but Luciano teach me the basics how to use the interface from the spectrum and such, and I was able to command the telescope and take several of the actual spectrum myself. So yeah, was a very nice experience. Aside being a very nice place, it's a really wonderful landscape to visit. So well, it was wonderful. Was each 5 days in each trip, so travel 5 days taking image, and after that getting back. So in total was 15 days of observation for this detective in Caselden. Actually, yeah, taking the weather was kind of nice every time. So I think maybe we lost only 1 day of observations in total. So yeah, a very wonderful experience. Also, the people in the telescope were a very, very nice team of professionals. So
as someone who works on one of those citizen science projects where it's not necessarily normal to be able to go out and take data directly because ice flows are maybe easier to get to if you live in Alaska than other stars are from Earth. But as someone who works on a project where we never expected this level of contribution, Hugo taking it upon himself to go on this journey was mind-boggling and impressive. And we are getting very close to publishing some of the spectra that Hugo took on those 3 observing runs. We are optimistic that we'll be publishing that paper later this year with Hugo as a prime contributor, because not only did he help find the objects, he helped us follow them up as well.
Indeed. Looking forward to do maybe some future visits in the future again to Caselden, now that we have Gaia to clear the way and avoid observing, hey, I don't know how I need to observe, graph anything. We have to cover the time and oh dear Lord, it's a giant or a galaxy. Oh, okay.
Our process has improved over the last few years as more large data sets have come on, and we actually relaunched the project in June of 2020 and are still actively taking classifications. So if you'd like to try it out for yourselves, I will very quickly type the link in. It is diskdetective.org. And if you want to take part, we are more than happy to have you contribute. It would help if I put 2 slashes in.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know how we are with the time, Sarah.
We're just about out. I'd like to start the Q&A soon.
Okay.
But if you have
just
one more.
a quick comment I want to do about once what you did at the start of the call, and something for Dan about why a super user stay in a project. So just quickly, like what in the start of the call was saying, the interaction with the science team and the science team explaining was opening the doors to the tools. Hey, you want to know more? Well, look here. We do this like more or less in this way, and the care of the science team for the project were, in my case, also the key to me. Okay, I want to be there, to be here. I want to keep being here, and I want to remain in the project as long as it is on. Well, in the case of this detective was from 2014 for me. I started in April 2014 as a super user.
Happy birthday.
Oh yes, good point. Good point. Yes. Speaking of the date, yes, more or less in this day. So yeah. Thank you.
8th birthday. Wow. Thank you both. And we will start our Q&A. And if anyone has a question, you can put it in the chat. But I am just listening to the 4 teams that we've heard present. This idea about caring seems to come. This seems like a really strong theme, that the scientists who are engaged in these projects care about their science, that the people who are encouraging others care about the people, and that has really made a difference on the Zooniverse projects and even on Fresh Eyes on Ice, where the science team is caring about the safety of the communities who are involved. So that seems like an important theme. I'm just gonna get it so we can all see everybody. And then this idea of a culture of helping and making that visible and helping people connect with other people, like-minded people who can join them as well. And I'm going to put it back on gallery view. We do have a couple questions, and if anyone else has questions, stick them in the chat. So I'm going to start with a question for Els. Els, you've done, it sounds like, more Zooniverse projects than anyone else ever. And without naming names of projects and trying to subtract out the content of a project and whether that's of interest or not, I'd love to hear you reflect on the things that make one Zooniverse project more engaging than another. There's something that you can put your finger on?
Actually, no. Engaging for me, I mean, I've participated in so many different projects very varied. Most of them space related, but not all of them. There are there's a project where you have to put in meteorological data, so it's just entering figures, but it can be very relaxing to do that. So sometimes I just choose that project to just say, oh yes, well, relax and do that, and then other times it's well, looking for planets or yeah. No, I can't really say which project means more to me than another. Well, yeah, but it depends on what day it is, what day I had. So, yeah.
Understood. So it depends on the mood that you're in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful that the even on Zooniverse, but also in the citizen science space, there's kind of something for everyone at any time in their life, with however much time they have. So I had another question in mind, and now it looks like Riley has also asked the same question for Fresh Eyes on Ice. I'm interested in what you said about the project creating space for community identity and community culture to come into play. Can you say a little bit more about how do you incorporate that local culture?
Karen, I think you might be the, yep.
I'll go first, since I'm actually in the community, because we have small communities and small schools. So I know in one of our communities in McGrath, the whole school is involved in the program, and they actually all go out on the ice together, so that's kind of creating school identity. But they also bring in community members to help set up tents for warming up and bring refreshments and things like that. And also by intentionally, providing assignments that facilitate bringing elders or knowledge bearers into the classroom, that also kind of brings in that element of connection between the school and the community members as well. And I think the subject matter, because it's so relevant to everyone in the community, that also fosters and builds on that cultural component, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. That the topic that you're pursuing really is of essential interest to the communities, because in some cases their lives and certainly their kind of well-being and communication with each other can depend on it. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting.
Right, and there's also a communication component too. We ask the students to create a project that then is brought to the community for education, making an educational poster or in some way give back, so that it's not only bringing information into the students, but also providing those students the opportunity to share their information with others. And I think, some citizen science projects are really more oriented toward individual people participating as individuals, and they can accomplish it themselves. And this is much more group oriented.
Which is a wise design move, given the nature of Alaskan communities. Yeah.
And I was just going to add to that we're mostly working with rural communities in Alaska, and a lot of them are small, like there'll be 10 students from kindergarten all the way up to seniors. But we also work with a class in Fairbanks, which is like a 4th grade class, 30 students, and seeing the excitement and enthusiasm they get for doing this kind of work. Also, like we did a field trip with them out to a local lake, and they got to go ice fishing, and we took ice cores and used an underwater camera and things like that. And they came back and they were so excited that the teacher had emailed us with this long list of these different questions that they were interested in. I mean, all the way down from like animal tracks to like how climate change is affecting snow. And they're going to end up doing like 2 posters at this symposium that we're doing on Earth Day in a couple of weeks. And well, it's hard to like actually like all the students want to come to the symposium. We're only imagining a couple coming to like actually present their posters, but one of the posters is actually going to be on what the students can do help prevent climate change, which I'm not sure what they're going to come up with, but it's I mean, they're super motivated. These are fourth graders, so so it's really cool to work with kids and work with kids like in all different kinds of educational settings, you know, from little communities with you know, kids from 5 to 18 in one class to, you know, a regular kind of classroom setting. And anyways, it's really exciting for me to be involved with that kind of thing.
So I think you just put your finger
And-
on another theme of giving people who are participating in citizen science projects a chance to ask their own questions, which I've heard over and over again from super users, that idea of having a chance to ask your own question and do your own side project on something that's lit you up is really engaging. Nora, I'm seeing you nod. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. So we also, I guess Mark did this first. We have these live sessions where the super user, or not just super users, anyone can just join and ask questions directly. And I think that is really valuable and actually does encourage this kind of going to the next step and doing additional analysis and using various tools. So yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's important to provide the space to ask, that people can ask these questions. But it's also, I think that it's kind of, I think it has a knock-on effect. I think these kind of whatever we want to call them, side projects, because if the super users come to these, I should again say anyone's invited to come to these, but if people come to these sessions where they can ask questions, they then have the answers and they tend to share those again on the discussion forum. So I do think it has a knock-on effect, and some people prefer to ask the questions directly to the science team and other people prefer to ask the questions to the community. And so it's all a matter of teamwork. But yeah, I agree.
So Liz McDonald tipped us off to your coffee chats having multiple funding sources, and she was curious and maybe thought you should share about the structure of your coffee chats, because it might be a reproducible model for other projects.
Oh yeah, they've been great to kind of get the engagement up. So it's funded partly through, well, I guess it's solely funded through a NASA grant, and that's led by NASA by the Ames Center. So and then obviously I'm on the project, so that's partly funded through Zooniverse. So we've just been working together to make these resources and these tools, and we release a video once a week, and just they're not the videos are different from other videos in that we're not just giving information about specific kind of science topics. We're actually giving tools and we're saying this is what you can do and this is how you can do it if you want to do it. And we cover things from vetting and rolling out false positives to analyzing data, and it's really, people have been watching the videos and posting the stuff back on Talk and encouraged other people to also use those tools. So we've seen quite a big increase in engagement, and that again has kind of had the knock-on effect of people attending the vetting sessions. So it's all I guess that comes back to providing the space to ask questions, and if people submit questions, we also try to answer them in the videos. So it's I would suggest trying it for other projects as well. I think it's been quite successful. We've seen quite an increase in what we've seen on the site. So yeah, I think it's been good.
Yeah, and people get to see you interacting with each other and maybe get a different sense of you as a person. Do you think that makes a difference in engagement as well?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, maybe. I guess it's so hard on Zooniverse. You always just have that tiny little photo and then just words that come out on the screen. So maybe seeing me actually talk is nice. It's nice to have. It's also nice to have seen some of the faces behind some of the users. So it's gone both ways. It's nice to see people. What's also been quite cool from these new sessions, it's really encouraged people to use tools even that we haven't discussed yet. So people are now doing full transit modeling, which is not something we've discussed, but they've kind of been motivated, which I guess has been a theme here as well today, by these videos and being motivated to do their own science and take it to the next level. We just had a an active user, and so a moderator actually, he helped develop a tool which is now being used to analyze more of the data. So it's been really good.
Great. So Dan, you're probably the last person we should be asking this question of, but there's a good question in the chat about super users and time commitment. And you all on this call are some of the extraordinary citizen scientists, but we're curious about how much time you spend, and how does somebody carve this much time out of their life, and is it possible to make these extraordinary contributions with a time budget?
Yeah, I think Backyard Worlds is a really good example, because as it's designed, you can use it on your phone. You can be sitting there, in a taxi, on the bus, watching a movie, and one of the users, instead of knitting, she'll do this. She'll have a movie on she doesn't care all that much about, and she'll be sitting there classifying. You can absolutely make a difference like that. Some of the things that we've done, we've chosen, given what we have for time and what we have for expertise, to create side projects and searches, and many citizen scientists trying their hand at papers that definitely take more time, and you can't do that if you don't have the time. But the way this project's structured, there are important things you can do with just little bite sizes.
Yeah, Jackie just pointed in the chat. There's a little exchange. Hugo said, we don't have a social life. And Jackie said, but this is a social life. And it does, every time I've talked with any one of you, you talk about the strength of your relationships and your connections with other people who are part of the project. So it does feel like this is a different kind of engagement and community that's really satisfying in many ways. So I'm putting words in your mouth. Anyone disagree or want to say more?
I'd say too, one thing that I've, the relationships that you end up developing with each other, from citizen scientists to the PhDs. I don't even like giving the differentiation there. It's like our team, like Dan and I have done karaoke at a conference. That was really fun, Dan. And my whole research group came. Plus Dan had a random friend. We were literally socializing, intersecting our circles of social life. And we have one of the participants, Backyard Worlds, Les Hamlet, has been observing with me on the IRTF telescope. And it's been a lot of hours. And you chat, there you are from 2 o'clock in the morning until noon or whatever it's going to be, from Hawaii to Eastern Standard Time. You get to know each other. You become friends. I consider Dan a friend now, right, Dan? You better say the same thing, because it'd be awkward if you didn't.
I agree.
Yeah. So, I think that's why, Hugo, I would say we're also, if I come to Argentina, I'm calling you up. We're going to hang out.
For sure.
That feels like a really nice part of this.
I agree. I've told a lot of people one of my favorite things that I get to do with Mark and with the NASA program is work on these citizen scientist profiles. And everyone I talk to or work with, I want to go visit you. So watch it. As soon as we can all travel again, I'm going to hop over to Germany, and I have a few people to visit over there, and then down to Argentina, and Belgium. And yes, I'll hopefully have a good beer budget with me, so it'll be fun.
We have citizen scientists over Japan. We can go and visit also.
All over the world. That's another extraordinary thing, that you get to make friends across country lines, which I think is needed today more than ever. So other questions does anyone have for this group of folks? Oh, and we're sharing recipes. Mark, do you have any questions for this group? You know them all pretty well. And we've heard about your dad jokes. Maybe you want to come online and share one. Are you able?
Mark can also sing, so you can also ask him to sing a bit.
Goodness, I guess I was curious about, the coffee. chat example is so interesting because here you have one group of folks whose their first goal is to get science done, and they have a grant that says we're going to write science papers. And then you have another group of folks who their first goal is science communication, right? And their metrics are things like, how many people were engaged and what did people learn. And they teamed up to create this coffee chat. I was wondering, is there anything like that we could make happen in the Arctic for our ice experts? Any other synergies with other groups?
Well, visiting communities is, it's like one of the things that I think is most important in terms of like building relationships. But for me, it's just a wonderful opportunity to learn about life in places like that, and actually, make those connections. And I think we've made lots of friendships in that way. And now through social media, we kind of continue those. But we're just, for example, we're going to visit a small community on the Kuskokwim River next week that we haven't visited yet. It's going to be, there's only one other community we haven't visited yet, and that's a homeschool community in Southeast Alaska. And they're already talking about having a community get together in the evening, and we have this ice bingo game we're going to play, and we have this activity where we lay out maps and have people indicate different places where they've made observations and things like that, and share their stories. So, those kind of things to me are priceless, and something that I guess we hadn't really anticipated in this kind of a project, but kind of are the most rewarding, and kind of can lead to a lot of new discoveries and new questions, which I think is pretty cool.
Oh, cool. That's good to hear, Chris. I had another question for you, if you don't mind, about equipment. It seems like all the pictures show people with these giant drills, which maybe you don't have in your, maybe not everybody has in their garage. I was wondering how you, do you have just like a big warehouse full of drills that you give out everywhere? Like, how do you get the equipment out to the people who need it?
Yeah, we have ice kits. We have kits for measuring ice thickness and snow depth, and then measuring how much water is in the snow. And then we also have kits for making sure the ice is safe. Ropes and harnesses and chisels and things like that. So we actually just assemble those and we ship them out to people in one way or the other, or we deliver them. Yeah. It's interesting, but I think one of our PhD students on the project, she's actually studying kind of the effect of what having tools has on science identity in students by giving them tools to actually take measurements and collect data. What effect that has on students feeling like they are scientists and they may choose a career in science someday. So it's neat.
The sort of like Backyard Worlds has Wise View, and you guys have the ice fishing drills.
That is powerful, though, as a way to signal belonging.
Yeah.
Like if you trust someone enough to give them the actual tools that scientists use, whether that's software or an ice core drill, it does make a difference in how you see yourself. Same with the white lab coat in those circles. Well, we are just about at the top of the hour. So Mark, I think you were going to say something about our April 21 event.
Oh, why? Yes, I was. So our next event on April 21st is going to be more about these close relationships with citizen scientists, in particular, how they've led to publications and the ups and downs of that journey, and It's going to be another awesome workshop. We have more than 227 citizen scientists who have co-authored publications. We have a new publications page, which I'll put in the chat, which attempts to list all of the publications that citizen scientists have co-authored. These are scientific publications in refereed journals. It's the real thing, and it's full of citizen scientist names. We're very proud of this. So join us again on the 21st, and we'll talk all about how this works, how this comes to be.
Great, thank you. And knowing, sorry.
Just something very quick. When you mentioned having the access to tools is also a way to belong into a project. Also the access to the data, because in the citizen science project, when you become a super user, you have access to a lot of, let's say, internal data, to say, so to speak, because that is spreadsheet and tables and catalog, not access for the public. So that also creates a kind of a special feeling when you are starting to feel like a real scientist in a way when you are starting, because they let me see the data, they let me work with their data. So that is also very important, not only the physical tools.
Excellent point. And having the experience of learning how to unlock information or a story from the data.
Indeed.
That as an experience is one that's, I think you're right. It's an essential one to
I learned how to use all the page like Simba, VCS and such, thanks to Steven, Mark, and well, the other science, citizen science that we're learning in that moment. So yeah.
Good point. Thank you very much. Just to close out with one other announcement before we can return to our conversation. One more thing about the 21st. NASA really does put a lot of value in co-authored papers between citizen scientists and scientists. So we're having a conversation with examples, but we're also going to be talking about some of the strategies and processes and structures that help to make those really doable for a science team, which inevitably has too little time, and citizen scientists who may have a lot of ambition but little experience. And we're going to talk about how to structure that well so that it's successful for everyone. And if you're interested in learning more about citizen science and practice thereof, I want to bring your attention to, and I'm going to share a link in the chat as well. There is an opportunity to contribute a poster abstract submission for the upcoming Citizen Science Association's C-Science Conference. So among other things, they're going to be talking about the name Citizen Science. But that conference is coming up in May, at the end of May. There is a special late breaking call for posters that closes on April 10th. It's an easy submission process. Share your NASA citizen science story. And Rihanna, is there anything else that you wanted to say, or Jennifer, about that? The link is in the chat.
I'll just add that more details on the program will be posted later today. If you're curious about who else is talking and what the event looks like, check later today or early tomorrow.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us today. If you have to leave, we do understand. And if you want to stick around for some more informal chat, we're going to stop recording and we'll keep it going. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you so much for staying up late, our friends in Europe. Jörg, thank you for being here. It's good to see you. Nora, if it's bedtime, we understand.
It might be.
It was a pleasure.
I'm going to